The officers reported and responded to shots fired. Officers arrived and found 4 people who had been shot. Officers found a 24-year-old male deceased, a 22-year-old male deceased, a 22-year-old female deceased, and a 21-year-old female expected to survive. Crime Lab collected 2 firearms at the scene. Detectives believe that an unknown subject or subjects may be involved and still outstanding. Further ballistic examination and an autopsy will need to be completed before investigators know more. Officers arrested an unrelated individual for criminal recklessness after it is believed he fired a weapon several blocks away. Homicide detectives have spoken with this involved individual at this time, and it is not believed he is involved in the shooting incident reported earlier. We grieve those lost and those injured. It is horrific and unimaginable that this occurred. I will also add that we are very early in the investigation, and there are some things we just don't know yet. However, we are asking anyone that was on Broad Ripple Avenue this morning and witnessed what occurred to call Crime Stoppers at 317-262-TIPS. We know several witnesses were present, and we are pleading with them to come forward to help detectives understand better what occurred. You can also call lead homicide detective James Hurt at 317-518-9064 or email Detective Hurt at james.hurt, H-U-R-T, at indy.gov. That's james.hurt@indy.gov. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce Chief of Police Randall Taylor.
First of all, just let me say our thoughts and prayers are certainly with the family of those lost in the tragic event that occurred early this morning. It just seems like we're here too often, to be honest. The event that occurred this morning, unfortunately, is not new. And the sad thing is, it happened in a place that many people, myself and my family, my kids included, have spent a number of hours in Broad Ripple and certainly enjoy Broad Ripple. Broad Ripple should be enjoyed. But we have a problem with people that decide that they want to carry out their issues with each other in a place like Broad Ripple and using guns. I've said this before, probably a number of times, where we ask ourselves, what really is the issue here? Why does this continue to happen? And I've said before that I believe that there is an emotional immaturity that exists. You know, when we did have a permit carry, there was like 15 categories that people had to pass through in order for you to carry a gun legally. And one of those categories had to do with your mental stability. I will tell you, as I've said before, I'm not a fan of us losing the permit carry. But if it were to come back, or if I could add anything to it, I would want something that has to do with the emotional maturity of the subjects that carry guns. We don't know all what happened in this particular incident, but I can guarantee you it's going to boil down to something around someone didn't like the way someone looked at someone, or didn't like what they said to them, or something silly like that that cost 2 people, at least 2 people, their lives. This has got to stop. It makes zero sense. You know, back when I was a kid, I remember there was a little kind of rhyme that we would used to say, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And we would say that to one another because we would say, well, whatever you say, I can get past it. Apparently that doesn't exist anymore. Now 9mm shells and .40 caliber shells can fly downrange in any particular neighborhood, in this case in Broad Ripple, and they can indeed injure and kill somebody, sometimes innocent people. I've said before that Indy can do better, and I believe that is the case. But folks, I think we've got to figure out something with people carrying guns. There's too many people who don't need to carry them, and tragedies like this occur. I would now like to turn it over to Kip Tu, who is the Broad Ripple Village Association president.
Actually, I'm not president. Tom Drew's the president right there, but our executive director was out of town and couldn't be here today, so I'm here on behalf of Broad Ripple Village Association. Again, my name is Kip Tu. I'm on the board. This morning, we sent a letter to the mayor's office formally requesting a gun-free zone in Broad Ripple Village on Friday and Saturday nights to run through August 31st. And as you all may know, the mayor and his administration asked for or has proposed a gun-free zone for several areas. We are obviously a district that thinks that we need it, and we want to work with the mayor's office to try to bring that about. Thank you. And I'm turning it over to the mayor.
Well, good morning. I know that all across this city, people are asking themselves, what has changed about Broad Ripple? Well, let me make it perfectly clear. Nothing has changed about one of our most vibrant, creative neighborhoods and entertainment districts. Here's what's changed. In 2012, when I was serving as the United States Attorney, the federal prosecutor, there were just over 50,000 active gun permits in Indianapolis. This year, we are on pace to end the year with nearly 160,000 active gun permits in this city. And that's after the state legislature took action to encourage the permitless carry of guns in this city. That's triple the number of legal guns on our city streets in just a decade's time. And that doesn't even begin to speak to those guns illegally possessed by those who flout those weak gun laws that our state possesses. While I have the utmost respect for the Second Amendment and the rights of law-abiding citizens to own guns, what we saw last night is what has changed about Broad Ripple and so many of our entertainment districts. It is the belief that it's perfectly appropriate to go out and inject a deadly mixture of alcohol and guns into neighborhoods such as this. It wasn't always this way. And it doesn't have to be this way. We are here today to say enough is enough. We will not let this level of lawlessness and carelessness reign supreme over places like Broad Ripple. Now, I'll be honest with you. If I had the ability to keep guns off Broad Ripple Avenue on Friday and Saturday nights, I would do it right now. But our state legislature has seen fit to ensure that I do not have the authority to do that. Luckily, we're joined here today by a hardworking neighborhood organization and representatives of that organization who share our belief that guns don't belong in entertainment districts. As I announced just a few weeks ago, the city has actively encouraged civic, neighborhood, and private organizations who do host high-traffic events to consider requesting special event permits that, once granted, would allow them to declare these activities to be gun-free. This morning, I'm heartened after speaking with the Broad Ripple Village Association leadership that I've received their commitment that they will be requesting such a permit to be issued beginning next weekend. If this permit is approved, I have pledged my full support that IMPD and other city agencies will provide the resources and support to enforce this reasonable request. Beyond that, I met this morning for several hours with police leadership, and we've begun the process of identifying problem properties throughout the Broad Ripple area that have consistently been shown to foster the kind of violence we saw last night. In the coming days, the city prosecutor's office and IMPD will be meeting with these problem property owners. As I announced just a few weeks ago, the message will be simple. If you do not take basic common sense steps to ensure that your properties are not magnets for criminal activity, we will use the full force of law to hold you accountable. This is not how we're going to live. Hundreds were terrorized in Broad Ripple last night because of the actions of a reckless individual or individuals and their guns, which they may have been perfectly legal in carrying. And when they were empowered by a set of reckless policies that are designed to ensure that the simplest solutions aren't on the table, tragic evenings like last evening or early this morning happens. This is what they may want, but it is not what we are willing to accept. We're going to keep working each and every day to identify ways in which we can keep our city safer. We're going to keep working each and every day to identify ways in which we can keep the men and the women of IMPD safer. And we're going to keep working each and every day to identify ways in which we can make Broad Ripple safer. So we'll take questions from the podium.
When we have this conversation about the open carry law, we obviously saw the governor veto it, but both leadership in the House and the Senate were in favor of it. This is really a culture war issue. You have the legislature pointing fingers at the city, you guys pointing fingers at the legislature. How do you come together on this issue, which is a culture war issue, when the results of it, it seems like, are this?
I think last night is a pivot point because, and I can't speak to this from personal knowledge, but I don't know who was involved had the legal right to carry the gun. I bet most of the actors last night did have the legal right to carry a gun. And if those failed policies are continued, then inevitably we'll see more instances of this. And that is why the announcements I made just several weeks ago about repealing permitless carry, repealing concealed carry, limiting the availability of military-style assault weaponry, common sense measures that are supported by a vast, vast majority of the residents of Indianapolis. Let me make it clear. The Indiana General Assembly, I respect their authority, and I adhere to their authority. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that they have to change the law of the state of Indiana. I'm the mayor of Indianapolis. I just want the legislature to give Indianapolis the opportunity to provide for common sense measures that are applicable to Indianapolis.
What are the additional security measures that you have put in place in Broad Ripple, and how effective have they been?
We're in the process of, well, our police presence has been certainly increased as the result of complaints that have been made by Broad Ripple businesses and the Broad Ripple Village Association. But I will tell you that with the filing of a permit for gun-free zones, I think that the efforts that we will be making over the course of the Friday and Saturday nights for the rest of the summertime will have an important effect. And then, as I said, holding business owners who are acting irresponsibly accountable for the decisions that they make, I think will change the culture of the city of Broad Ripple, and we intend to do that.
So do you think a gun-free zone would have prevented what happened last night? Or this morning, I guess?
I certainly think a gun-free zone, if implemented appropriately, would have the same effect in Broad Ripple that it did just a week ago in Garfield Park for the Wonder Road Music Festival. Now, IMPD might correct me, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong, but I think that that festival, which attracted thousands and thousands of people, went off with very, very few, if any, incidents. Certainly no incidents of gun violence. And I would anticipate that that kind of implementation would have the same effect on the streets of Broad Ripple.
It was
Explain
said
how
that
a gun-free zone works, because I mean, are people getting stopped and frisked, or, I mean, how do we prevent, what if I walk through with a gun? How is somebody gonna prevent me from walking through Broad Ripple Village with a gun?
Well, you have to walk through essentially a magnetometer. And they are stationed by employees of the Village Association or volunteer assistants.
So there would be metal detectors set up?
Yeah,
in Broad Ripple.
in essence, you don't need to, as I understand the new technology, you don't need to take out your phone and your keys and your coins. You can literally just walk through. By the way, I think the same type of technology was used at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Indianapolis 500 this year. And if the scanning technology detects a gun, then a law enforcement official will take appropriate action so that the individual cannot enter into the event space with a weapon.
It was said that there were 400 to 500 people gathering. When something like that happens in Broad Ripple, is that something that police are immediately alerted to? Is it legal, and was there police presence there when that first gathering was taking place?
Well, it's not unusual to have 400 or 500 people in Broad Ripple on a Friday and Saturday night. It's one of our jewels. It's an entertainment zone. So I think that number is the amount of people that were there. The mayor spoke briefly about what our ongoing Broad Ripple entertainment zone plan is, and that is, officers working overtime. That's officers that are employed by certain establishments. That's our proactive units. It's nuisance abatement. It's many people that are out. What we're seeing and what we're going to try to wrap our hands around, and what we've been working on, is some of the open parking lots that allow people to gather that aren't necessarily going into any of the establishments where, and Commander Thomas has first person experience, and one of the complaints we've heard from community members is that a lot of times people aren't not going into any establishment, that they're openly walking around with rifles and handguns in the open through the streets and sidewalks of Broad Ripple, in the parking lots, drinking, which none of those things are illegal. You can openly carry a weapon, you can drink in public, and you can gather in parking lots that are open to the public. law enforcement does not have the authority to remove people from private parking lots. And so we're going to work with the people that own those lots and try to find ways to barricade them off if they don't want people in their lot. That the city resources that the mayor talked about will be utilized to, through our partners with DPW and others, to set those barricades up to ensure people don't have the ability to park in those lots and that they, to just gather, right? Broad Ripple is open for people who want to enjoy what's here in the community and do what's right. It's not open for people who want to participate in lawlessness, as we've seen grow over the past year in Broad Ripple.
What was the police presence like there last night?
A couple dozen officers in the area, and then multitudes more after the event happened. The second and third order impacts of that is that we have to bring resources from other parts of the city who then lose their own valued police protection, and we don't want that to happen. So we want to be as proactive as we can so we can keep our officers in all neighborhoods in the city and not just isolate them in small geographic areas.
Can you recap, is the death toll now three victims killed? You said at the beginning.
There is, there's two that were declared dead on the scene. One person was taken to the hospital in critical condition, and that person is fighting for their life right now. And then one person was injured and is expected to survive.
So
Two dead right now, yes.
I have a policy question. At last week's event in Garfield Park, it was explained that this was, while it was a public property, it was a private vendor who was running this event. And so, and that's why it was possible to do a gun-free, because it was the application was submitted by this private entity. How do you see this working in broader? Are you going to get the business? I mean, BRVA can't speak for all the businesses, just for its members. But how do you? Mayor said he'd like to close off Broad Ripple avenues from gun. Can't do that. So how are you going to get this to work on private property?
Well, it's specific to public property. So the street and sidewalks are public property. So it's open space that's public property that's being permitted out.
Okay.
Is my understanding.
Do we know if the bars there are gun-free? Do they have gun-free signs? Would that be a solution to this problem, or?
I can't speak to each individual business. Those are private businesses. They can enforce that. They obviously have the right in the law to not allow weapons in their facilities.
Do you know what the four people who were either killed or injured, what were they doing? I mean, what was their activity? Were they at the bars? Were they in a parking lot? Kind of how was that going?
Yeah, as best we can tell, they were there just like the other several hundred people that were there in Broad Ripple. We don't have any information at least right now, that they were coming from a bar or going into a bar. Everything we know is they were just there with the several hundred other people that, many times, I think Chief Taylor mentioned and Chief Bailey mentioned, you have a lot of people who don't go into bars. They are literally just hanging out. And that continues to be a problem, because then you mix alcohol and you mix conflict, personal conflict, and it really becomes a challenge to try to police that with several hundred people. So the one thing I would like to add that Chief Bailey, when you talk about, measures that were going on this morning, we also had nuisance abatement that was out, and they work with excise police to really try to target troubled locations that may be festering some of this behavior. And so we'll continue that enforcement effort along with Commander Thomas and his proactive teams that are out there every weekend. Nuisance abatement will continue to be partnering with excise and others, fire, to name just a few, that will continue to work with troubled establishments.
Since we're talking about problem businesses, did this, I believe the scene was in front of Kilroy's, was that, did they play a part?
No.
Are they a problem business?
No, your first part of your question is, did they play a role? No. Obviously, those troubled establishments, they know, because we meet with them, we talk with them, we try to advise them. We're not going to, publicly mention that here, obviously, as we continue to work with those establishments, but Kilroy's was not a part of this one.
But they're not, doesn't sound like they're improving or changing.
Some are. I mean, you see that downtown, right, where we had a big push and a lot of those establishments got better. Broad Ripple. There are some that we work with that have gotten better, taking our advisement. We try to work with them on a plan to include technology, off-duty officers. So there are some in Broad Ripple and across the city that continue to work with us, and we continue to make those improvements.
Sort of back to his question on so the metal detector, I mean, so is there gonna be a section of Broad Ripple Avenue that's cordoned off and you gotta go through these scanners in order to get in? I mean, can you control what people are walking on?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're, we don't have everything laid out specifically today. I mean, we just received the request, or the mayor's office is receiving the request today from the Broad Ripple Village Association. And so we're going to have to plan out what that looks like and see how we can contain the area and utilize the technology. It's the technology is called Evolve, I think, is the company name. It doesn't this past weekend, I think there were no guns detected, but there were some knives detected, and those individuals simply took their knife back to their car, and there were no incidents that I'm aware of.
Is
I
that
can take one
legal?
more question.
Is that legal under state, two things really quick, is that legal under state law to make it a gun-free zone? And also, what's your message to people who are frustrated and feel like the efforts that you're making aren't working?
Well, I mean, there's carve-outs and not being an attorney, but let the attorney tell you.
I'm Matt Giffen, I'm the corporation counsel for the city. To that legal question you asked, there is a carve-out in state law that says that when private organizations are hosting or promoting events on public property, on leased out public property, then they can make and enforce their own rules. So the way this works, I mean, it's kind of a compressed timeline that we're talking about if this all works, but the Broad Ripple Village Association will apply for a special event permit. And that permit gives them the right to host an event in a public area. Once they have that, then they can say, we want to make this a gun-free event, and we want the city's help logistically to enforce our own rule. So that's how it works under state law. It's a carve-out to the usual rule, which is that cities aren't allowed to regulate guns. And as the mayor said, we can't just unilaterally say that Broad Ripple's gun-free. But somebody who's hosting an event there, if they're leasing it out and if they have the proper permit, they can create a rule that we can help them enforce.
So every weekend is gonna be an event?
Well, it depends on what that application says. We'll have to see.
Okay.
Thank you all very
Thanks.
much.